Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go in depth about each best of five, right? Each best of five. First and foremost, we have G2 versus GENG tomorrow. So that's where we're going to go in depth. But when it comes to each specific series, I'm going to take care of that in the rundown. I don't want to put that much pressure on myself to, I usually record these one take Drake, boom, 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 one take Drake. And if I'm going to go deep into each player, each matchup, I think that I'll get fatigued by the time I get to the third best of five. So I think the best thing that I can do is to sleep on the next best of five and then boom, boom, boom. But you will get my predictions. You will get my predictions with some smaller notes. But when it comes to the in-depth juice that I would like to provide on the matchups, you're going to find those in the rundown. So for example, after the GENG G2 series, I'm going to record the rundown of each match, give you guys my feedback and details in terms of how strong the team, individual performance, the team performance. We're going to review some stuff, learn from these teams, right? And then we move on. And then, boom, we're going to talk about Mad T1 very, very, clearly, thoroughly, with a good time. Okay? But I will give you guys my predictions, and I wanted to have a overall conversation about MSI before we begin, right? MSI, it's like we have never ever had this format. In essence, we've never had a situation where a team comes into a tournament and the first thing that they need to play is a BO5. The reason I bring this up, right, is because it poses a very different challenge. A very, very different challenge. It's very interesting, very intriguing, but it is a different challenge. And I wanted to highlight this because I can assure you that coming into these best of fives, we will not see the final form of all of these teams in the first initial best of five. Okay? If you look back to the previous formats where we've had best of ones, there's been, for example, T1, right? T1, for example, us on Fnatic, we beat them, right? We beat T1 in the first round. Their preparation was very poor. Our preparation was better. We played Lucian, Nami, Azir. We had Poppy going, and then Aatrox, and they had Jackson to Poppy, and they made a huge crucial mistake in the bottom side that made Lucian, Nami snowball, right? With time, they adjusted. They prepared well against us, and they could prove that they were the better team. Because they were, right? Us beating them in that one match didn't prove that we were the better team. We just happened to have the better preparation, and certain circumstances within the game made us win the game, right? And we played well, they played well, and we had the better preparation, and so forth. So I wanted to make it clear, in these first initial best of fives, we're not going to see the final form of T1. We're not going to see the final form of GENG. We're not going to see the final form of JDG as well. I'm focusing in and honing in on the teams C9 as well. We're not going to see their final form in the first initial best of five, because when you're only scrimming, a lot of ideas and theory is left untested. Okay? When you have these teams that go through play-ins, and why often play-in teams are capable of making deep runs is because in that exploration of playing on stage, you get used to playing on stage, and additionally, you begin to recognize the patterns of what works in practice. When I say in practice, I mean like when you are supposed to perform, what draft ideas work, which champions work, right? And when we see GENG, this is maybe they're going to drop a game or two. Maybe they're going to hit the ground running, right? For example, T1 as a team, I don't think that their dry preparation, I'm going to call it dry preparation. What I mean with dry preparation is, it's like when you go into a BO5, not having played and also not having seen the enemy play in the same tournament. Dry preparation. So now these teams have had like a solid month of dry preparation. T1, JDG, and C9. Very dry preparation. Golden Guardians, Bilibili, you could even say Mad and G2. They're still, they still have sweat on the backs from their previous matches. More so Bilibili, Golden Guardians, and G2 because it's very recent, right? Mad Lions, they were the team that finished their playoffs the latest out of any team, right? When I think of T1 as a team, their dry preparation is probably the weakest out of all of these teams, together with Bilibili. Because in terms of their drafts, sometimes very wonky. This is the type of team that needs to lose in order to recognize the mistakes, right? T1 as a team, how I define them, I think in terms of their dry preparation, rather weak. That is where they falter. They had the finals against GENG. They tried to course correct, started playing Sion. They tried to course correct because their idea wasn't strong. And then they pivoted and played exactly the game that GENG prefer to play, right? Like they played the Jace, and then there was the Gragas, and then all of a sudden, shit, it's not working. What the fuck do we do? And then they pivot, right? T1 is the type of team that are very, very good individually, mechanically, and also in terms of how they play the macro game and how they snowball. Insanely good, but in terms of their preparation, it leaves a lot to desire, right? I take you back to the finals of last year's Worlds. The read on Aatrox, they went full circle, right? They created a circumstance where they could get value when the enemy first picks Aatrox, so their top laner could play into Aatrox, but they traded it for some kind of value. They gave Aatrox first pick, forced the enemy to first pick Aatrox, and then they picked 1-2, the other power picks, and they said, Zeus, you can play into Aatrox, right? But then they got lost in that, because there was no longer any value that was gained of giving up Aatrox, and then they went full circle, right? My point is, T1, very poor, dry preparation team. Sometimes they need to lose in order to wake up again. You saw that in the regular split too, which some people are going to argue. Game 1, they played well, stomp. Then second game, they kind of go all over the place and they drop games. And then game 3, win, right? We saw that often. Maybe you could say T1 is testing things. They have a free game to do so. It's best of 3. That's fine. If someone told me that, I'm okay, right? The other side of it, right, is that when you have teams that have played games like Bilibili, GG, and G2, and also Mad to some degree, they have revealed their hand, and the enemy can prepare specifically against that, right? There's benefits and negatives to having played games in the tournament that you're competing in. Not only have you revealed your hand to your opposition, but you have also revealed how to play your hand to yourself. Right? And that's important. An additional layer, for all the EU fans, right? I think in terms of how much the meta has changed, I would have to say that G2 Mad Lions can be happy with the fact that the meta hasn't changed super much. That's at least from what we've seen so far. This could be wrong. Could be wrong. But Mad Lions and G2, I was worried about the proposition of the LEC playoffs being played so late and them coming into this tournament, having no time to rest, having no time to digest the patch. But in all honesty, a lot of things remain the same, right? Maokai is being played, Vi is being played, Nidalee is now in the picture, Nautilus Mid is in the picture, but that is like a fine progression, right? These were champions that were kind of lurking in the background anyway, right? So I don't think EU's scheduling is going to be that big of a problem here. Another thing, right, that I'm very curious about, that I don't know specifically, is I don't know how these teams actually spend time preparing. The biggest advantage on top of being really, really damn good, the biggest advantage the Eastern teams have is the fact that they can scrim each other. And in preparation for this tournament, they could have scrimmed each other. And when we think of Europe or C9, right? C9 came to Europe, they scrimmed, but they didn't do it super, super long. They couldn't practice in NA, they took a time off, and then they came here to Europe to practice maybe against G2 and MAD, right? JDG, T1, GENG had a lot more options. They could have chose to scrim, they could have chose not to scrim. They're better solo queue. They can scrim against teams that are preparing for the next season, whether that's LPL teams and LCK teams. This is on top of the fact that they just look better, right? By every metric. But the fact that they had the option to practice against each other. You know, there was this conversation the last time Europe, the Worlds was in Europe, right? It's like the Eastern teams took their time before they arrived, and the 3 days leading up to the World Championship, G2 started scrimming down one and so forth, and they got so blasted, and all of a sudden you get this shock, right? And that could be a massive disadvantage too, on top of the fact that they are just look better, right? Another thing that is interesting is that performance fluctuates. Performance fluctuates, and coming in now to the bracket stage, having the first match that you play be a BO5, you know, there's going to be a process of unrusting that we need to pay attention to. I would be very surprised if the teams GENG, T1, and C9 and JDG play at their peak from the get-go. And that is where there's room for opportunity for the other teams. Because I think with what the teams have revealed, you can adjust your ban specifically, right? You can adjust your ban specifically. But I think that these teams have enough depth to be prepared, right? And now if we look at the matchups, so there's been a lot of talk about the format. I think the format is still fantastic. The format is still fantastic. We just happen to have a very rough draw. Very, very rough draw. I said at first when we saw GENG versus G2, I was like, GENG versus G2 MAD? I was like, wow, this is a great draw. This is a good draw here for G2. Until I saw T1. Then it became a very rough draw. Ideally, the circumstance that you're in is that your C2 is not T1. That is like the hope, right? You just want to make sure that a C2 team is not T1. My take is that T1 is one of the favorites to win the tournament. I don't think the finals takes anything away from that. T1 is extremely dangerous. Very, very dangerous. A lot of memes about them choking in the finals, but there's going to be a lot of fucking best of fives before the finals. So that meme is not going to even kick in. Okay? For those who don't know as well, right? If we assume that the Eastern teams are going to win, meaning GENG wins, T1 wins, Bilibili wins, and JGG wins, we're going to have Golden Guardians versus C9 here. And then we're going to have G2 versus MAD here. So basically, in the first portion of the loser bracket, you're going to be playing against the other team in the bracket that loses. Okay? And following that, this best of 5 is going to be cross-group. So there is a circumstance where we're going to have just a rerun of all the regional, like basically all of the domestic finals. So if there's a chance we're going to have GENG versus T1, JDG versus Bilibili, C9 versus Golden Guardians, and then Mad Lions versus G2. Right? Which is kind of hilarious, if you ask me. Obviously, BDS and MAD was a final, but MAD versus G2 was a banger, right? and some people claim that that was the real final. But I do think there's room for some upsets here. So I can tell you plain and simple now, if I have to predict the winners, I do predict the Eastern team to win these best of fives. I predict GENG to win, I predict T1 to win, I predict Bilibili to win, and I predict JGG to win. But I think there's room to play with some percentages. Right? I think G2 has the potential to upset GENG. I think that G2's approach to the game is very polarizing to GENG's approach to the game. I think that the easiest way I would explain GENG, I think that they are a much elevated, better version of BDS. Okay? What does that mean? I think in terms of securing their lanes and playing for specific item timings and playing for efficiency, GENG is really, really fucking good. Really, really good. And you could argue, right? You could argue that GENG counters G2. But I think it goes both ways. G2 love to create variance in their play. They love to create variance in their play. They have a very volatile bot lane. They are very good at transferring pressure. And they can create chaotic game states, which I believe a GENG can potentially struggle with. But the key thing here, right, is that GENG have experience against teams that are trying to throw wrenches in the cogwheels, right? GENG managed to dissect a T1. GENG managed to also do well against a Damwon, right? And these are teams with players that like to be unorthodox, right? Another layer of it, right, is that GENG, on the meta that they were successful on, I think that not a lot of things have changed. Not a lot of things have changed. What is the hope factor here for G2? The hope factor is that this is not a meta where Chovy can really exude his level of presence as a player. So how do I define Chovy? Chovy probably is and has been for a very long time one of the best laners, if not the best laner, to grace the game. But we're in a meta where that metric isn't super important. You're playing Gragas, Nautilus, Lissandra even, you know, it's good to have CS, but there's a lot of other elements that really, really matter in the current state of the game. How well you connect with your teammates, your local awareness, your willingness to sacrifice waves to piece things together, right? That could be a potential liability. I say potential. For example, G2 could walk into this series, maybe they target Chovy's Ahri, right? Maybe Ahri is going to be a solid ban. And then, you know, I could still easily see the situation where Chovy just slams Cassio, Lissandra into Gragas and just dissects the Gragas. I could easily see a world where Chovy locks in K'Sante against Nautilus and Nautilus is not allowed to do what he wants to do. Right? Chovy is aware of what's going on in the meta. And he's going to try to enforce his way of playing the game through champion choices, right? Because Chovy can play so many different champions. Fantastic player, right? But if things get hard in that clash, and Caps can enable himself, right? Things can be good. I could see a world where G2 walk into the series, they ban Kesante, they ban Vi, they ban, for example, Ari. That could be an angle, right? To deny some of these things that they believe the enemy team will use as counters to what G2 want to do. I think Caps has played well so far. I saw signs of the old Caps. Then again, it's against minor region teams, right? So it is what it is, right? We didn't get to see G2 versus Bidi Bidi because that would have been very interesting. Very, very interesting. If we saw G2 versus Bidi Bidi, we would have seen like more depth because they would be tested on a deeper depth. Another layer of all of this, right, is I mentioned I think GENG is in a position where the meta has remained quite similar. But maybe there are things that are happening in scrims and in the preparation that I don't know. Maybe all of a sudden the Nidalee beta will hit hard. Maybe it's kind of disrespectful to think Caps is better than Chovy. Who said that? I shouldn't get one guide. In a world where there's been massive meta shifts and you can really, see a world where things get deeper, right? Let's say Nidalee is prio, Belveth is prio. Maybe Kha'Zix is better than I thought. I personally dislike these champions, and I would prioritize other things. But that could be an angle for G2. While I think stylistically GENG is fantastic against G2, G2 can also be fantastic into GENG. They are very, very polarizing against each other. But that's when you begin to look at player skill and performance. And I think GENG wins out there. I think that when I think of top, Doran versus our boy BB, I think that Doran is not the type of player that is going to really shove his fist into Broken Blade's mouth and break his spine, right? I would be more worried for BB against a Zeus and a Bin. Because these guys are very, very deadly when it comes to lane, and they're going to really squeeze you and play with higher variance. While Doran prioritizes this element of consistency. Right? And if you want to look at that category of top lanes, it's like BB, Doran, 369. They play a very specific role, and they play those roles very good. They show up in team fights, right? Doran is a coin flip player. I don't think he's a coin flip player, but he's definitely had some terrible games. I wouldn't say that is due to a nature of coin flipping, because I don't think necessarily that he takes high risks. It's just some games he has played very bad, and some games he plays very good. So there's definitely an element of variance, but I wouldn't call him a coin flip player, because I think that implies that he really wants to push for risk. He's an emotional player. I can't speak to that. I don't know Doran. But definitely what I can say is he's had very shit games, but he's also had good games. And I think the best version of Doran is the person that can hold his own and burn enemy jungle time and make sure that Peanut can spend his time securing his bot lane and also securing mid, setting up lane ganks and setting up for objectives. This is what GENG does so well. I mentioned it at the beginning of this conversation. I believe that GENG is like the elevated version of BDS. Much more elevated version of BDS. I'll add that. So the main questions for me in this matchup, right? Can G2 be crazy enough to force GENG to play outside of their patterns? Will GENG just break anything that G2 throws at them and just 3-0 them? There's a chance of that too. But I believe G2 is aware of what they are, right? And I think that in a world where G2 had the better individually performing players, then people would say G2 is the counter to GENG. I just think that these are very, very polarizing in terms of who they are. They are opposites. G2 want to elevate variance and they want to really, really make the game chaotic, and they want to really, really leverage their sense of flexibility within the game. Because what does G2 do good? What does G2 do good? They are very, very good at transferring pressure. They're very, very good at analyzing what the win objective is and really, really make the right sacrifices to elevate that point, right? That could be a good thing, right? That's their strength. But can they exude that against the GENG? I doubt it. And that's why I believe GENG is going to win. But I think there's an angle here. There's definitely going to be an angle here for G2. But I think GENG is the favorite. Peanut, I think Peanut, in the context of the current meta, I think Peanut is really fucking good. Peanut is Shio on crack, in my opinion. Peanut does a very fucking good job of pathing choices, very good of securing lanes. He makes sure that his lanes are safe. He finds really good lane ganks on bottom side, supports Chovy at the right times. I think that Peanut is really, really intelligent. But I can see a world where it's like, in a world where the meta is Vi, Maokai, Sejuani, Wukong, I really, really like having a Peanut on my team. Poppy, Trundle, I love having Peanut on my team. I love it. Fantastico. And it looks like that's the meta right now. And at the flip side is there a world where Yike can be playing the Nillies and the Belvets, and that is just what is the best thing to play right now, and you can't get away with going towards these champions that have been nerfed? Because Sejuani has been nerfed, Maokai has been nerfed, Vi has been nerfed, Poppy has been buffed. Maybe you can't get away with it. I think another layer of this as well is that I think that the teams that GENG have faced regionally and also defeated have tried to do this to them. I saw someone in the chat, right, referencing the World Championship of last year. That was Canyon like having a performance rating of 100%. And even in those games, Peanut played better in, I believe, 2. In the other 3, Canyon really devoured him. But Peanut had some good games too in that series. The Pioshik versus Peanut one was a lot rougher, I think, because that was like a complete collapse, right? That was Peanut on Viego, and that looked atrocious, terrible. And I get there's people out there that say, yo, Peanut in the old days, he was the best Nidalee, he was the best Graves, he was the fucking mechanical god Lee Sin because of his Rocks Tigers days and even the T1 days, right? But he's not the same, he's not that player anymore. Ever since he went to LGD and I watched his pro views, he's quite lazy mechanically, you know? But in terms of how smart he is, really, really good. I prefer Peanut than Kanavi. Ooh, that's a stretch. But if you only look at this year, if someone says Peanut over Kanavi, okay. I think just Kanavi is a little bit more meta-proof. So we talked about the Chovy Caps matchup. We talked about the top lane matchup. We talked about the jungle matchup. If we look at the bot lane matchup, I think that Mickey does a better job of connecting to the game. And I think that he is insanely smart when it comes to leveraging his pressure. Insanely smart. And I think Mickey, I think in terms of impacting the map, I think this is something that Europe does so well. All right. I think that when I look at the supports in Korea, I think like my favorites are Korea and Lehens. I really like Lehens. Really like Lehens. Like really being able to tune into the game. Mickey is the reason why sometimes G2 can pick greedier champions and get out of lane phases because Mickey enables that, right? But I think often it comes off of the back of being able to dominate bot, right? That's like the main concern for Mad and G2. Will they be able to out-muscle these fucking heavy-ass bot lanes that they're playing against in order to connect with the ideas of the game? That will be like the biggest challenge. Because a Hilly wants to connect with his jungler, wants to exude his pressure, wants to play in fog, and wants to connect with the game, and sometimes picks very greedy. Plays like Rel into Thresh, right? As an example. But will T1's bot lane allow that? Why is Lehens in the conversation though? I just mentioned him as my favorite supports, right? Genji's support is Delight, yes. But I mentioned Lehens because he shares attributes that I really value high in a support. I think FaZe will crumble under the pressure. I think facing T1 in a final already is a lot of pressure. Maybe FaZe is sitting there, T1 will always into a final, and then he just felt no pressure. Maybe he's just the GOAT. I doubt that this is what he was saying to himself. When it comes to FaZe and when it comes to FaZe, right, and also Hansama, you know, it's interesting because, you know, FaZe, he is 3-1 on Draven, and one Draven loss was a steal that T1 took from them. It's like, this man does know how to swing his axes, okay? He does know how to swing his axes well, and it could be something that is maybe competitive, right? They have room to maybe invite the Draven or pressure the Draven. There's room to do that. Probably they won't, right? You guys are underrating Delight a lot. Delight is really fucking good. Don't get me wrong. He's really fucking good. Really fucking good. I don't think he's bad. He's good. You know? That's not what I'm saying. I just mentioned some attributes that I think can maybe play a difference. And I think the difficulty will be, how will they find ways to enable Mickey to impact the map? Because I think that's where Mickey can be stronger. Right? So, if we look at Genji's draft structure, right? We look at their draft structure. These are things, it's like if you look at their 1, 2, 3, right? These are 1, 2, 3s we still see today. They can literally connect and play in the same way, right? Enemy first pick Jace, Xayah Rakan, they banned Annie Lucian, right? It's like, if you want to highlight some flaws, right, is that their Lucian Nami was quite poor. G2 have some imprecisions later on in the game. Like, they need to be really, really fucking sharp to even, like, conceive, you know, an ideal victory. You know, they need to be really, really fucking sharp. And Genji is coming in cold, right? That can matter, right? That can matter. And I think that's an important detail to pay attention to. I think G2 didn't get pushed much in play-ins. I didn't think they get pushed at all. I love the fact that G2 showed Gragas. They showed Cannon. They showed Xayah Rakan. I love to see this, okay? I think this is super, super good. God bless them, you know? Fantastic. I think they're capable of playing Lucian Nami, Xayah Rakan, Jinx lanes, Cannon first pick, Gragas first pick, Nautilus first picks. I think they can compete. They don't have a lot of prior on Vi, G2, which could be maybe a problem. But the main question for me still, like, if there's an angle in, is that Chovy won't be able to keep up in a game that is relevant to connecting to your teammates. But I believe Chovy is aware of this, and he's going to prepare picks that are specifically good into the facilitating champions, like the Nautilus. It's like right now everyone's cooking counters to Nautilus. They're cooking counters by picking flex champions that are strong. Something that the Eastern teams have been very slow with is Olaf. I'm hoping that the Eastern teams play Olaf. You can even send Olaf mid into Nautilus, because K'Sante will be out, right? Caps cooking Taric mid. Like, the key thing about the counters to Nautilus is that the counters to Nautilus are top laners. I would love to see Zeus Olaf. I would love to see Ben Olaf, but I don't know if it's gonna happen. Set, I feel like K'Sante is just a better set. K'Sante is just a way better set. Let's be honest. Ever since K'Sante has been in the game, I haven't seen a single set in any matches that I play. Urgot is supposed to be really good into Naughty, but the key thing, right, is if the enemy... So if the enemy picks Naut, okay? And it's like, here you can respond with K'Sante because you can hold the flex all the way till the end, right? And K'Sante is a pretty decent... Adam said fucked Odo K'Sante. No, he fucked Odo Olaf. Get your facts straight, bozo. No, I'm kidding. You're good. I'm watching League all day, so... So like, if the rotation is like this, I think it's GG already. I think it's already lost. Because what happens is, K'Sante is a very decent blind top, but you can keep the flex till last. And at some point, the enemy needs to reveal their hand, right? Let's say we saw the structure of this. As an example, okay? As an example. And then here, you know, still, like, my main question is, what the fuck is Pino gonna play? Right? And then here, you need to make a choice. Are you sending Nautilus Jinx bot into Trash Aphelios, which I don't think is winning? Or do you send Nautilus mid? And if the enemy shows that they're sending Nautilus mid, by, let's say, they pick Blitzcrank, and they pick Blitzcrank, Olaf, as an example. Which obviously could be bans for 5. I'm just running through an example. Then you're like, okay, we're going to send K'Sante into Nautilus, and we're going to pick something into Olaf. Like, let's say Nar, right? But then you need an AP jungler, right? Obviously, it's like an Olaf ban would make sense. Like, I don't think Olaf would ever go through. I think Olaf probably 1-2-3 ban or 4-5 100% of the time. They're not gonna ever let BB pick Olaf here, right? One is a champion like this, like what I wanted to highlight, the only thing, right, is just K'Sante versus Nautilus. And the main thing that you would have to solve if you have K'Sante is that you need to find AP damage mid or top against, against not mid. It's like the Taric thing is interesting, right? Because it's like, if you pick Taric, you need to be willing to send it bot if Nautilus goes bot. And Taric needs to match. You cannot end up in a situation where where Taric goes bot and you have to set up Taric for success. You need to have the right champions around it, like Viego, Taric, as an example. But the main answers into Nautilus mid are K'Sante, Gwen, and these are the champions that I would fucking want to go for. Yeah, of course, there's champions. There's more champions you can pick into Nautilus, but you want to be useful, right? Humanoid said that Naut is useless after any AP mid laner gets third item. Well, most games are decided before you get the third item. A lot of games are decided when you get one item. Okay, this is not a therapy session for you guys to point random champions that are going to win against Nautilus in isolation. There are answers into Nautilus, right? It's like K'Sante will most likely be a ban. I think Vi will be a ban. And the question is, how will they treat Aphelios, right? I could see a situation play out like this. I could see a situation play out like this. And then we have a game. And then here, it's like the question is also like Rakan could be the answer, you know, could be a ban. Because there you need to choose, right? It's like, if the enemy can fucking Zaya Rakan or Aphelios, I think it's already good for Genji, you know? It's hard to choose. And then it's like, they have to go Lucian, Nami. And then they pick... It's like already they revealed the Nautilus is going mid as an example. They could pick jungle. And then you play the game, right? Because I think this is what's so dangerous. It's like, I think the fact that they can Zaya Rakan 1-2 and they're willing to pick Aphelios, I think that's where the danger comes, you know? I think this is where the danger comes. I hope Genji drafts this badly tomorrow. What the fuck happened to my... Oh, there. Okay, it was just disappeared. I just think Zaya Rakan and Aphelios 1-2 is very strong. I think Zaya Rakan and Aphelios look stronger to me than Zeri right now. This circumstance could be also interesting, right? Would they just pick? It's like if enemy first picks, then they will go Aphelios, right? This could be an angle, right? This could be an angle. This could be an angle, right? This looks interesting. But the whole issue is then Zeri Lulu will come, right? And that's where the AD carry depth is good. Right? This is where the AD carry depth is really going to show up big. I think in terms of like the bot lane pool, GENG have options. GENG have options because they've shown Aphelios, Zeri Lulu, and so forth, you know? But all in all, like, I summarize for the final time. I think Peanut and Chovy functioned the best in specific circumstances. And there is a chance that the circumstances will favor more the type of game that Yike likes to play and Caps likes to play. Because they're very different players. But the odds of that happening is rather slim due to how the meta has evolved. The main question for me is how will GENG figure out the jungle champion? I think that they are very polarizing in the way they play. G2 need to increase volatility a lot and create a circumstance where they can connect together and they can find advantages and really focus in and hone in where they can apply their pressure and make the game very high paced. While GENG have a lot of experience against teams that have tried to do this to them. You think of T1, you think of Damwon. These are teams that have tried to enforce that on them and GENG has stood strong. And I mentioned it before, a lot of these GENG drafts from the finals, they are still very applicable to this day, right? I think that they will ban Draven. I don't think Draven will be in. And I think G2's best bet is to just continue exactly the same way they've done, right? They have a very unique style, and that uniqueness is what is going to make, which is what is going to test GENG. But these teams are very polarizing in the way, will GENG be able to stabilize and just spit in the face of whatever G2 is trying to throw at them? Then the games will look very one-sided. G2's best bet is to make the game scrappy. And that is my take. We will cover all the other matchups a lot deeper on the rundowns of the specific days, right? On the rundown of the specific days, that's where I will do a deeper rundown. For example, tomorrow after GENG G2, we'll talk about the GENG G2 series, and then we're going to go deep in the Mad versus T1 conversation. The short business, though, is I think T1's going to win. I think Bilibili is going to win. And I think that JDG is going to win. Any questions surrounding GENG versus G2? We covered the head-to-head. We covered the potential openings that G2 has and why I believe GENG is stronger. Score for G2 GENG. I think score is wildly uninteresting. But it's either like 3-2 G2 win or like 3-0 GENG win. C9 probably beats Billy. They're great at team fighting. It's like the reason I think Bilibili is going to beat C9 is that I think inherently C9 won the region because they're individually better. And I think that C9 in terms of prep are really fucking good. It's like in terms of dry preparation, I think C9 I rate really high. I have this feeling that C9 has probably better prep than JDG, better prep than T1, better prep than GENG. right? But I think that C9 got away with a lot because they're individually better. It's like Berserker heavily outperformed opposition. Fudge had moments where he outperformed heavily. Eminus, I think, was really, really fucking good as a mid laner, right? Really, really good. C9 walk into the series with really, really good. Like, I imagine that they're going to prep super fucking well. What do you mean with when they prepped? I think that they've figured out they have a lot of depth in their draft structure, and I think that they can find ways to, you know, find edges in draft and also potentially preparation. But I think in terms of their fundamentals, bro, there's some shit that we saw in the Golden Guardian series that just fucking looked horrendous, right? That Golden Guardian series, that finals was very dirty. Very dirty. And I think that if you give certain advantages to Bilibili, they will eat your hand raw and you will not be able to out-muscle your way out of situations. It's like the key thing, right, is that C9, their solo laners are very, very feast of famine. Very feast of famine. Either they like pressure and they get advantages, or they fuck up along the way and they try to like work their way out of that. I like the side of Fudge, the fact that he can play the Scion role and he can play the role that is going to support the team, which I think is going to be very important. I don't think that he should test ego check Bin. I don't think that's the way, right? Could be the argument that Bin is really fucking good into tanks and he can play like so many different champions, but I think that's like the room, right? I think if Fudge like tries to ego check, I think it's rough. Like if Fudge is walking into a game and my man's picking Fiora and there's like a skill matchup against Bin, rough. I wouldn't want to see that. You know? I think Yagao didn't perform so well in the play-ins, but I don't want to sell out Yagao just yet because he had a good playoffs run. He played good in playoffs. But in terms of like the 2v2 mid-jungle, Bilibili is kind of rough there. And that's where Golden Guardians found opportunities. They caught June, they caught Yagoat. You know, there is room there. Yagao tends to turn up when it actually matters. You haven't watched Yagao internationally. But yes, Yagao is a strong player. I'm not going to undersell him here, right? Because didn't Licorice shit on Bin one game? We will cover that when we do a deep dive of C9 versus BLG, because I think that is just a meme. A meme. Don't get me wrong, Licorice played fucking good. If I look at Golden Guardian's performance, I think Huhi and Licorice, their individual performance has fucking elevated. And I think that is what has made GG so much better. Very strong flanks, decent, solid laning from Licorice. Huhi, you can maybe, you know, think about it, you know? The thing is, I think Licorice deserves to be praised for holding his own and being impactful in the series against Bilibili. But to say that he shat on Bin is a fucking overstatement. I think Licorice deserves to be celebrated for his performance in that series against Bilibili, but that's only because we all imagined him to be fucking monster-fisted. Licorice was up in CS almost all 3 games, so that's factually incorrect. Okay? Well, almost is a vague word. So if you're gonna say, well, he was ahead in the Kesanta versus the other game, right? Just to round this off, because we started this topic, right? Let's say game 2, Bilibili versus GG, because that's the main point of reference, right? So basically, we had this moment in the game where Nar roamed down to mid, okay? He roamed down to mid. So right now, So right now we have a circumstance where Licorice died in River, right, and Zoom died, and there was this scuffle, right? And right now the game looks fucking over. By the way, like I think the game is fucking lost. I couldn't believe Billy lost, right? Can't believe, like, you tune into this game and you think this game is so fucking over. You can't even you lose your mind, right? So what happens in this game is that Bin is laning, he crashes the wave, and they are even, right? They're even top, okay. Well, that's good for Licorice, right? And then what happens? Bin walks down into mid. He opened through mid. And look what happens, right? He kills Yasuo. And he kills Gory. And the trade-off is that right now, 2 waves are in his turret top. 2 waves. And Licorice breaks the turret. And Nar pushed in half a wave mid. And now he broke a turret, he popped Demolish, he got platings. You know, Licorice did what he's supposed to do. I don't blame him. God bless him, you know, he's good. Sorry, I will move the camera. He got the plating stop, he pushed in waves, and this was because, of course, our boy on Nar walked into mid to kill the Yasuo, right, to defend. And the follow-up from this is that Vi goes into bottom side eventually. It's going to be the circumstance where there's this map trade. Rakan abandons bot because he can't lane bot. And Nar here cannot lane on this turret. So is this Licorice gapping Bin? Or is this Bin just respecting the flow of the game? Well, Licorice is kind of shitting on him, right? And don't get me wrong, guys, it is perfectly fine to praise Licorice for the series because he played well. But to say that he put Bin in the dumpster, that is, guys, calm down. It really, really puts an unfair expectation on Licorice because I do believe that his elevation in his play should be celebrated. But I don't think it should turn into delusion. So he gets zoned off, right? Licorice bonks the turret, Demolish. They get a full turret advantage. You know, on top of that, Licorice had a fantastic base. You know, he had a fantastic base of the platings. He has full item. Nar is still sitting, Nar lost fucking 3-4 waves into the turret. Right? And now he's in a very good condition. And Licorice performed super, super good. But did he shit on Bin? No. Yeah, Golden Goddess played very well, right? And Billy had no patience to break this because Jinx... It's like here, you retake when Jinx bases. But now they're fucking retaking before Jinx bases, and this is Golden Goddess in space. Imagine Jinx bases, they open up on here, and they're gonna defend the top side. This is a trade that they committed into. But here, Billy really run it down, right? Miru shit on Yagao. Yeah, he did. That Aurelion Soul game, he completely shat on him. 100%. Right? And this was just a map trade. And then eventually fucking what happened to Bin? Now Bin is sick of this shit, right? Bin is sick of this shit. He goes to his top turret because he saw that the enemy homies went for him and then he gets fucking murdered. Bin got zoned off the wave for fucking 3 minutes straight and then he gets dove. And sure, you could say, yo, Licorice is shitting on him, but you know, it is what it is, you know? Top gap. But then you like have the game 1, right? As an example. This game 1. This game 1, okay? So we have Nar into Malphite. Nar into Malphite. We don't see really what's happening, but Licorice is completely And now Bin is outmaneuvering this situation. He's completely chilling. You know, Bin is fucking smurfing here. Can I say that he is completely taking shit on Licorice? Well, in some sense, he put Licorice in a position where he can't get ganked, right? And Bin was so stone fucking cold. And here still, like, even in this game, right? This Nar was extremely effective and was very strong in this game, and he has insane base. Still, Licorice managed to remain useful even in a circumstance where Nar gets 2 kills. That's good. Now Licorice is like, he's getting pressured by this fucking Nar. I'm like, oh, Licorice is doing a good job, like maintaining his CS numbers up. That's good, right? Same thing with Bin, right? He eventually was sick and tired of fucking backing off and sitting at his tier 2, and then he walked up to die. That's a mistake, right? But like, I get why he did it, right? Okay. So, finally, I think JDG is gonna win. I think Billy is gonna win. I think T1's gonna win. I think Jenny's gonna win. We talked about a lot. This was a good time. I hope I can put this into something cohesive coming into tomorrow. I mentioned once again, if you made it to this end, this far into the video, because this is just a incohesive mess, I bless you and bless your face, first and foremost. And we are going to cover each matchup in detail all the way to the end. We also talked about like the dangers, like not the dangers, but the nuance of such a format, right? These teams are coming in dry. Like GENG might underperform in the first best of 5 that they play. T1 might underperform. C9 might underperform. JDG might underperform. They're coming in cold. We don't know how their preparation went. We don't know. We know very little. And the first thing they're gonna play is a best of 5 on a big stage. That's fucking spicy. That's fucking spicy. Do you think Fudge is going to get dumpsters? Answer honestly. I think in skill matchup, yes. But I think there's ways to neutralize top and turn it into a mind game. JGG can underperform and still 3-0 GG? For sure. Yeah. For sure. 100%. Maybe teams are still jet lagged. Maybe someone's jet lagged. Could happen. Maybe someone can't sleep on the day. Maybe they're gonna completely run it down. There's room. I can tell you for sure, I think the performance the teams are gonna show us in these best of 5s is not gonna be their final form. That's what I think. It's the same thing, right? It's like Billy. Everyone's judging Billy for the player's performance. And I think there's, to a certain degree, right, there was like this idea that the meta got pushed in a certain direction and Bin couldn't get away with playing like Jax and so forth into 369 and be useful in the game, right? So there's a conversation that they needed to readjust and become a bot lane centric team. Okay. But at the same time, it's like I've watched Billy the whole year, and I don't think that, I wouldn't judge them so harshly for their playing performance. That's why I think that, based on what I've seen from C9 and Billy the whole year, that's why I lean towards Billy. But more on that on day 3 or day 2 of MSI that will lead into day 3, which is, of course, C9 versus Billy.